Now, Breakthrough One-on-One also helps you mentally prepare for your weight loss journey. Visit RevyveU.com for more details. Here, we'll take an inside look at what it's like to be coached. The feedback I'll be providing my client Scott is meant to provide him with direction and encouragement. Because right now, I don't know what's kept him from making changes to his health. So all I can do is accept the fact that he's here and he says that he's ready to change. It's my duty as his coach to be a great listener, to be open-minded and really get to know him. That means I'll have to probe, asking him questions meant to tear down barriers, get him to let his guard down and be open with me. See, Scott isn't any different than I am, or any different than any of you. I know there's a battle going on inside of him that's kept him from living his best life. He knows that change starts here. Change starts with him and no one else. Now let's get to work and see how I can help Scott. In his current environment, Scott is very comfortable. He's not being challenged to make any changes. His lifestyle is fairly simple. When I asked him to describe his typical day, he said he wakes up at about 6 a.m., has a morning coffee, catches the news, and heads to work. He says his job in computer programming pays him well and his days are pretty easy. When he leaves for work, he'll either head to the gym, to his parents' home, or if one of his teams is playing, he'll drop by a bar for wings and a beer. Now, Scott's a pretty personable guy. He's just not very outgoing. And from the conversation that I had with him, I can tell that he doubts himself. He doesn't seem to think that the kind of women he's attracted to would be interested in him, so he doesn't try to meet anyone. Now, he's the only child and travels back to his hometown to visit his parents about 2 to 3 times per week. And with both of his parents closing in on retirement, they'd like for Scott to find a girl, fall in love, get married, and give them some grandkids. I feel like he's carrying a burden, which may be causing him to feel inadequate, maybe even feeling like he hasn't been the ideal son. See, Scott hasn't dated anyone in the last 2 years because his last relationship ended abruptly. He doesn't seem to be quite over her. Ever since his roommate entered a relationship, Scott's been the third wheel. Now, his roommate's girlfriend encourages him to get out there and meet someone. From time to time, she'll even try connecting him with one of her friends. He doesn't feel confident getting out there and even trying yet. His escape from all that pressure comes from getting to the gym every now and then, which is very therapeutic to Scott. I can relate to that. He can picture himself being lean. He has a vision for himself. He'd like to be more active and learn more about exercise, but he says it's too confusing, too overwhelming. Both of his parents are clinically obese, and they're set in their ways, and they don't have any desire to make any changes to their lives at this point. His roommate isn't active at all. Scott feels alone at times, so his participation in the company's softball league gives him a social outlet. Now, he feels like losing weight and getting lean will help him with his confidence and his performance on the field. He'd like to eat better, but he doesn't know how to cook well. So his fast food diet and habitual snacking are both something Scott wants to work on. A recent trip to the doctor caused a lot of concern for him. He was told that he's pre-diabetic, and if he didn't make some changes soon, it was only going to be a matter of time before it progresses into full-blown diabetes. That was Scott's cue to action. So let's see how we can help him. Here we have Scott, age 35. Height is 5'9", weight 305 pounds. We can use his gender, age, height, and weight to determine his basal metabolic rate. For that, we'll use the Harris-Benedict equation. For a male, it's BMR equals 66 plus 6.23 times his weight in pounds plus 12.7 times his height in inches minus 6.8 times his age in years. Now keep in mind that his BMR only represents the calories for what his body uses if he's at rest all day. And since he's not resting all day, we need to incorporate his activities of daily living. We'll use a lifestyle factor to help determine his caloric expenditure. We typically use a factor of 1.2 to account for most people who have a sedentary occupation and limited physical activity. With Scott's semi-active lifestyle, I use a factor of 1.4. This is determined by the fact that his occupation is mostly sedentary, but he exercises 3 to 4 days a week, not to mention playing softball once a week. Now that we've calculated the amount of calories needed to maintain his current weight to be 3,645, we can sort of get an idea of how to implement a caloric restriction. Because if Scott wants to lose weight, he can't continue to consume that many calories. And if we kept it basic, we could use the difference between his body's caloric usage at rest to determine how many calories to restrict him to. Now, if Scott kept his level of physical activity and restricted his calories to 2,600, he'd have a caloric deficiency of about 1,000 calories. Research suggests that a pound of fat is approximately 3,500 calories. So it's safe to assume that Scott could reduce his caloric intake by an average of 500 calories per day and lose 1 pound of fat per week, 52 pounds of fat in 1 year, and so on. However, it's not that simple. The threat of diabetes really is stressing him out. He wants to lose weight faster. He also wants to learn more about fitness and increasing lean muscle mass. If we use the standard rationalization of calories in versus calories out, we can conclude that Scott's calories in aren't of the best quality. And in case you're unfamiliar with that terminology, calories in represents your caloric intake and calories out represent your caloric expenditure. When we look at Scott's calories in, we see that it consists mainly of fast food, junk food, and fried food. There are few, if any, whole foods in his diet. We know that his calories in will change significantly. Now, when we look at calories out, note that they will change for Scott along the way. Here's the X factor. In the assessment for a lean individual, we'd really want to focus on the dietary thermogenesis for the thermic effect of food. That accounts for 6 to 10% of our total daily expenditure. Now, numbers may fluctuate slightly depending on body composition, and because Scott is obese, this may account for 6% or less of his calories out compared to a lean individual. The other thing that we have to consider is that his current diet is void of a lot of important nutrients. When we change Scott's diet, we'll need to look at counting macros. Adequate protein intake as well as fiber will help him feel full longer and help prevent lean muscle catabolism. Put it like this. If Scott was consuming a nutritious 3,600 calories, the excess would still be stored as body fat, but he'd probably have a lot more muscle. Now here's the verdict. Scott likes the gym and he's ready to start packing on lean muscle. He wants to lose body fat and build a better body while getting healthy in the process. So what we need to figure out is what's a healthy body weight for Scott? Let's start by determining his starting body mass index. The equation for BMI is 703 times his weight in pounds divided by his height in inches squared. Scott's BMI is 45. Now, a body mass index score of 30 or more is considered obese. There are classes of obesity, class 1, 2, and 3. Scott would be in class 3, often referred to as severe. Now, the only drawback to this assessment is that it doesn't take lean muscle into consideration. In fact, many professional bodybuilders are considered obese by this equation. It's merely an assessment to help determine risk of developing chronic disease. And right now, we know Scott is in trouble. The suggested BMI based on his height and weight is a 25. That puts Scott's ideal weight at about 170 pounds to be considered healthy. Now, while we're going through the numbers together, Scott's doing the math in his head. He's panicking because he'd like to lose more than a pound a week and figures it's going to take 3 years to get where he needs to be. So I tell Scott that the 1 pound is just body fat we're estimating. It's not taking into consideration muscle, bone, and water. Our next step is to calculate body fat percentage. And we'll go over that and more in our next session with Scott. So make sure you drop by RevyveU.com to enter your name in our giveaway. Win 4 free weight loss coaching sessions and access to Breakthrough 101 to begin your journey to a healthy you.